a young boy, a shipwreck, and a wild stallion who refuses to be tamed. Today we kick off the Storytime Voyages chapter book series with the book The Black Stallion by Walter Farley. We'll be reading chapters 1 and 2 today. Chapter 1, Homeward Bound. The tramp steamer Drake plowed away from the coast of India and pushed its blunt prow into the Arabian Sea, homeward bound. Slowly it made its way west towards the Gulf of Aden. Its hold was loaded with coffee, rice, tea, oilseeds, and jute. Black smoke poured from its one stack, darkening the hot, cloudless sky. Alec Ramsay, known to his friends back home in New York City as Alec, leaned over the rail and watched the water slide away from the sides of the boat. His red hair blazed redder than ever in the hot sun. His tanned elbows rested heavily on the rail as he turned his freckled face back toward the fast disappearing shore. It had been fun, those 2 months in India. He would miss Uncle Ralph, miss the days they had spent together in the jungle, even the screams of the panthers and the many eerie sounds of the jungle at night. Never again would he think of a missionary's work as easy work. No, sir, you had to be big and strong, able to ride horseback for long hours through the tangled jungle paths. Alec glanced down proudly at the hard muscles in his arms. Uncle Ralph had taught him how to ride, the one thing in the world he had always wanted to do. But it was all over now. Rides back home would be few. His fists opened. Lovingly, he surveyed the pearl pocket-knife he held there. The inscription on it was in gold. To Alec, on his birthday, Bombay, India. He remembered, too, his uncle's words. A knife, Alec, comes in handy sometimes. Suddenly, a large hand descended on his shoulder. Well, my boy, you're on your way home, a gruff voice said with a decidedly English accent. Alec looked up into the captain's wrinkled, wind-tanned face. Hello, Captain Watson, he answered. It's rather a long way home, though, sir. To England with you, and then to New York on the Majestic. About 4 weeks sailing all in all, lad, but you look like a pretty good sailor. I am, sir. I wasn't sick once all the way over, and we had a rough crossing, too, Alex said proudly. When do you come over, lad? In June, sir, with some friends of my father's. They left me with my uncle in Bombay. You know my Uncle Ralph, don't you? He came aboard with me and spoke to you. Yes, I know your Uncle Ralph, a fine man, too. And now you're going home alone? Yes, sir. School opens next month, and I have to be there. The captain smiled and took Alec by the arm. Come along, he said. I'll show you how we steer this ship and what makes it go. The captain and the crew were kind to Alec, but the days passed monotonously for the homeward bound boy as the Drake steamed its way through the Gulf of Aden and into the Red Sea. The tropic sun beat down mercilessly on the heads of the few passengers aboard. The Drake kept near the coast of Arabia, endless miles of barren desert shore. But Alec's thoughts were not on the scorching sand. Arabia, where the greatest horses in the world were bred. Did other fellows dream of horses the way he did? To him, a horse was the greatest animal in the world. Then one day, the Drake headed for a small Arabian port. As they approached the small landing, Alec saw a crowd of Arabs milling about in great excitement. Obviously, it was not often that a boat stopped there. But as the gangplank went down with a bang, Alec could see that it wasn't the ship itself that was attracting all the attention. The Arabs were crowding toward the center of the landing. Alec heard a whistle, shrill, loud, clear, unlike anything he had ever heard before. He saw a mighty black horse rear on its hind legs, its forelegs striking out into the air. A white scarf was tied across its eyes. The crowd broke and ran. White lather ran from the horse's body. His mouth was open, his teeth bared. He was a giant of a horse, glistening black, too big to be pure Arabian. His mane was like a crest, mounting, then falling low. His neck was long and slender, and arched to the small, savagely beautiful head. The head was that of the wildest of all wild creatures, a stallion born wild, and it was beautiful, savage, splendid. A stallion with a wonderful physical perfection that matched his savage, ruthless spirit. Once again the black screamed and rose on his hind legs. Alec could hardly believe his eyes and ears. A stallion, a wild stallion, unbroken, such as he had read and dreamed about. 2 ropes led from the halter on the horse's head, and 4 men were attempting to pull the stallion towards the gangplank. They were going to put him on the ship. Alec saw a dark-skinned man wearing European dress and a high white turban giving directions. In his hand he held a whip. He gave his orders tersely in Arabic. Suddenly he walked to the rear of the horse and let the hard whip fall on the black's hindquarters. The stallion bolted so fast that he struck one of the Arabs holding the rope. Down the man went and lay still. The black snorted and plunged. If ever Alec saw hate expressed by a horse, he saw it then. They had him halfway up the plank. Alec wondered where they would put him if they ever did succeed in getting him on the boat. Then he was on. Alec saw Captain Watson waving his arms frantically, motioning and shouting for the men to pull the stallion toward the stern. The boy followed at a safe distance. Now he saw the makeshift stall into which they were attempting to get the black. It had once been a good-sized cabin. The drake had little accommodation for transporting animals. Its hold was already heavily laden with cargo. Finally, they had the horse in front of the stall. One of the men clambered to the top of the cabin, reached down and pulled the scarf away from the stallion's eyes. At the same time, the dark-skinned man again hit the horse on the hindquarters, and he bolted inside. Alec thought the stall would never be strong enough to hold him. The stallion tore into the wood and sent it flying. Thunder rolled from under his hoofs. His powerful legs crashed into the sides of the cabin. His wild, shrill, high-pitched whistle filled the air. Alec felt a deep pity steal over him, for here was a wild stallion, used to the open range, imprisoned in a stall in which he was hardly able to turn. Captain Watson was conversing angrily with the dark-skinned man. The captain had probably never expected to ship a cargo such as this. Then the man pulled a thick wallet from inside his coat. He counted the bills off and handed them to the captain. Captain Watson looked at the bills and then at the stall. He took the money, shrugged his shoulders, and walked away. The dark-skinned man gathered the Arabs who had helped bring the stallion aboard, gave them bills from his wallet, and they departed down the gangplank. Soon the drake was again under way. Alec gazed back at the port, watching the group gathered around the inert form of the Arab who had gone down under the black's mighty hoofs. Then he turned to the stall. The dark-skinned man had gone to his cabin, and only the excited passengers were standing around outside the stall. The black horse was still fighting madly inside. The days that followed were hectic ones for Alec, passengers, and crew. He had never dreamed a horse could have such spirit, be so untamable. The ship resounded far into the night from the blows struck by those powerful legs. The outside of the stall was now covered with reinforcements. The dark-skinned man became more mysterious than ever, always alone and never talking to anyone but the captain. The drake steamed through the Suez into the Mediterranean. That night Alec stole out on deck, leaving the rest of the passengers playing cards. He listened carefully. The black was quiet tonight. Quickly he walked in the direction of the stall. At first he couldn't see or hear anything. Then, as his eyes became accustomed to the darkness, he made out the pink-colored nostrils of the black, who was sticking his head out of the window. Alec walked slowly toward him. He put one hand in his pocket to see if the lumps of sugar he had taken from the dinner table were still there. The wind was blowing against him, carrying his scent away. He was quite close now. The black was looking out on the open sea, his ears pricked forward, his thin-skinned nostrils quivering, his black mane flowing like wind-swept flame. Alec could not turn his eyes away. He could not believe such a perfect animal existed. The stallion turned and looked directly at him. His black eyes blazed. Once again that piercing whistle filled the night air, and he disappeared into the stall. Alec took the sugar out of his pocket and left it on the windowsill. He went to his cabin. Later, when he returned, it was gone. Every night thereafter, Alec would steal up to the stall, leave the sugar, and depart. Sometimes he would see the black, and other times he would only hear the ring of hoofs against the floor. Chapter 2. The Storm. The Drake stopped at Alexandria, Benghazi, Tripoli, Tunis, and Algiers, passed the Rock of Gibraltar, and turned north up the coast of Portugal. Now they were off Cape Finisterre on the coast of Spain, and in a few days, Captain Watson told Alec, they would be in England. Alec wondered why the black was being shipped to England, perhaps for stud, perhaps to race. The slanting shoulders, the deep broad chest, the powerful legs, the knees not too high nor too low, these, his uncle had taught him, were marks of speed and endurance. That night Alec made his customary trip to the stall, his pockets filled with lumps of sugar. The night was hot and still. Heavy clouds blocked out the stars. In the distance, long streaks of lightning raced across the sky. The black had his head out the window. Again he was looking out to sea, his nostrils quivering more than ever. He turned, whistled as he saw the boy, then again faced the water. Alec felt elated. It was the first time that the stallion had him drawn back into his stall at the sight of him. He moved closer. He put the sugar in the palm of his hand and hesitantly held it out to the stallion. The black turned and once again whistled, softer this time. Alec stood his ground. Neither he nor anyone else had been this close to the stallion since he came on board, but he did not care to take the chance of extending his arm any nearer the bared teeth, the curled nostrils. Instead, he placed the sugar on the sill. The black looked at it, then back at the boy. Slowly, he moved over and began to eat the sugar. Alec watched him for a moment, satisfied. Then, as the rain began to fall, he went back to his cabin. He was awakened with amazing suddenness in the middle of the night. The Drake lurched crazily, and he was thrown onto the floor. Outside there were loud rolls of thunder, and streaks of lightning made his cabin as light as day. His first storm at sea. He pushed the light switch. It was dead. Then a flash of lightning again illuminated the cabin. The top of his bureau had been swept clear, and the floor was covered with broken glass. Hurriedly, he pulled on his pants and shirt and started for the door. Then he stopped. Back he went to the bed, fell on his knees, and reached under. He withdrew a life jacket and strapped it around him. He hoped that he wouldn't need it. He opened the door and made his way, staggering to the deck. The fury of the storm drove him back into the passageway. He hung onto the stair rail and peered into the black void. He heard the shouts of Captain Watson and the crew, faintly above the roar of the winds. Huge waves swept from one end of the Drake to the other. Hysterical passengers crowded into the corridor. Alec was genuinely scared now. Never had he seen a storm like this. For what seemed hours, the Drake plowed through wave after wave, trembling, careening on its side, yet somehow managing to stay afloat. The long streaks of lightning never diminished, zigzagging through the sky. Their sharp cracks resounded on the water. From the passageway, Alec saw one of the crew make his way along the deck in his direction, desperately fighting to hold on to the rail. The Drake rolled sideways, and a huge wave swept over the boat. When it had passed, the sailor was gone. The boy closed his eyes and prayed. The storm began to subside a little, and Alec felt new hope. Then suddenly a bolt of fire seemed to fall from the heavens above them. A sharp crack, and the boat shook. Alec was thrown flat on his face, stunned. Slowly he regained consciousness. He was lying on his stomach. His face felt hot and sticky. He raised his hand and withdrew it, covered with blood. Then he became conscious of feet stepping on him. The passengers, yelling and screaming, were climbing, crawling over him. The Drake was still, its engines dead. Struggling, Alec pushed himself to his feet. Slowly he made his way along the deck. His startled eyes took in the scene about him. The Drake, struck by lightning, seemed almost cut in half. They were sinking. Strange, with what seemed the end so near, he should feel so calm. They were manning the lifeboats, and Captain Watson was there shouting directions. One boat was being lowered into the water. A large wave caught it broadside and turned it over. Its occupants disappeared in the sea. The second lifeboat was being filled, and Alec waited his turn. But when it came, the boat had reached its quota. "Wait for the next one, Alec," Captain Watson said sternly. He put his arm on the boy's shoulder, softening the harshness of his words. As they watched the second lifeboat being lowered, the dark-skinned man appeared and rushed up to the captain, waving his arms and babbling hysterically. "It's under the bed! Under the bed!" Captain Watson shouted at him. Then Alec saw the man had no life jacket. Terror in his eyes, he turned away from the captain toward Alec. Frantically, he rushed at the boy and tried to tear the life jacket from his back. Alec struggled, but he was no match for the half-crazed man. Then Captain Watson had his hands on the man and threw him against the rail. Alec saw the man's eyes turn to the lifeboat that was being lowered. Before the captain could stop him, he was climbing over the rail. He was going to jump into the boat. Suddenly, the Drake lurched. The man lost his balance and, screaming, fell into the water. He never rose to the surface. The dark-skinned man had drowned. Immediately, Alec thought of the black. What was happening to him? Was he still in his stall? Alec fought his way out of line and towards the stern of the boat. If the stallion was alive, he was going to set him free and give him a chance to fight for life. The stall was still standing. Alec heard a shrill whistle rise above the storm. He rushed to the door, lifted the heavy bar, and swung it open. For a second, the mighty hoofs stopped pounding, and there was silence. Alec backed slowly away. Then he saw the black, his head held high, his nostrils blown out with excitement. Suddenly, he snorted and plunged straight for the rail and Alec. Alec was paralyzed. He couldn't move. One hand was on the rail, which was broken at this point, leaving nothing between him and the open water. The black swerved as he came near him, and the boy realized that the stallion was making for the hole. The horse's shoulder grazed him as he swerved, and Alec went flying into space. He felt the water close over his head. When he came up, his first thought was of the ship. Then he heard an explosion, and he saw the Drake settling deep into the water. Frantically, he looked around for a lifeboat, but there was none in sight. Then he saw the black swimming not more than 10 yards away. Something swished by him, a rope, and it was attached to the black's halter. The same rope that they had used to bring the stallion aboard the boat, and which they had never been able to get close enough to the horse to untie. Without stopping to think, Alec grabbed hold of it. Then he was pulled through the water into the oncoming seas. The waves were still large, but with the aid of his life jacket, Alec was able to stay on top. He was too tired now to give much thought to what he had done. He only knew that he had his choice of remaining in the water alone or being pulled by the black. If he was to die, he would rather die with the mighty stallion than alone. He took one last look behind and saw the Drake sink into the depths. For hours, Alec battled the waves. He had tied the rope securely around his waist. He could hardly hold his head up. Suddenly, he felt the rope slacken. The black had stopped swimming. Alec anxiously waited, peering into the darkness. He could just make out the head of the stallion. The black's whistle pierced the air. After a few minutes, the rope became taut again. The horse had changed his direction. Another hour passed. Then the storm diminished to high, rolling swells. The first streaks of dawn appeared on the horizon. The black had stopped 4 times during the night, and each time he had altered his course. Alec wondered whether the stallion's wild instinct was leading him to land. The sun rose and shone down brightly on the boy's head. The salt water he had swallowed during the night made him sick to his stomach. But when Alec felt that he could hold out no longer, he looked at the struggling, fighting animal in front of him, and new courage came to him. Suddenly, he realized that they were going with the waves instead of against them. He shook his head, trying to clear his mind. Yes, they were riding in. They must be approaching land. Eagerly, he strained his salt-filled eyes and looked into the distance. And then he saw it. About 1/4 of a mile away was a small island, not much more than a sandy reef in the sea. But he might find food and water there and have a chance to survive. Faster and faster they approached the white sand. They were in the breakers. The black scream shattered the stillness. He was able to walk. He staggered a little and shook his black head. Then his action shifted marvelously, and he went faster through the shallow water. Alec's head whirled as he was pulled toward the beach with ever-increasing speed. Suddenly, he realized the danger of his position. He must untie this rope from around his waist, or else he would be dragged to death over the sand. Desperately, his fingers flew to the knot. It was tight. He had made sure of that. Frantically, he worked on it as the shore drew closer and closer. The black was now on the beach. Thunder began to roll from beneath his hoofs as he broke out of the water. Hours in the water had swelled the knot. Alec couldn't untie it. Then he remembered his pocket knife. Could it still be there? Alec's hand darted to his rear pants pocket. His fingers reached inside and came out with the knife. He was now on the beach, being dragged by the stallion. The sand flew in his face. Quickly, he opened the knife and began to cut the rope. His body burned from the sand. His clothes were being torn off of him. His speed was increasing every second. Madly, he sawed away at the rope. With one final thrust, he was through. His outflung hands caressed the sand. As he closed his eyes, his parched lips murmured, "Yes, Uncle Ralph, it did come in handy."